practices. So one of the first things we wanted to do is help them develop strong communication channels with their industry partners. We felt like that was very important. And obviously communication is very important in everything you do when you're working with community partners. And then also provide regular professional development opportunities for educators. So that's another thing that we noticed with all of our family consumer science teachers. A lot of them did get a lot of professional development, especially in work-based learning. And then integrating industry feedback into curriculum design. That's another aspect that a lot of our industry partners said, we'd really like for these teachers to integrate some of the skills that we have in industry into their curriculum. And then also celebrating achievements and milestones within those work-based learning programs was really important. So in goal setting for these work-based learning experiences in these programs, we wanted to set some short-term goals with our teachers. And first of all, ask them to establish some initial partnerships. Go out there and establish one industry partnership or community partnership, whichever the case may be, and then develop some pilot work-based learning opportunities. And I'll talk about the training that we provided with them here in just a moment, and then initial student placement. So for example, we wanted them to go out there and find one industry partner that they felt like that related to the course they taught. So if they had a culinary program, they would go out there and find an industry partner related to that culinary program. They choose the work-based learning experience. It might be an industry tour. It might be a job shadow. It might be an internship, whatever the case may be. And then they would just decide how to initiate those student placements in that process. And then our long-term goals for them was to go expand those partnerships, increase that student participation, and start tracking those career readiness outcomes. So really what we were wanting them to do is starting work-based learning, not at the junior and senior level, starting it at the freshman level, all the way up to the senior level. So by the time they're graduating from high school, they have a pretty good idea about the direction they may want to go by the time they graduate from high school. And that's what we're seeing. We were not seeing as they're coming into the College of Health and Human Sciences. We're still seeing many of our incoming students coming in very much still undecided, even by their sophomore year, which is really a concern. So some milestones and benchmarks is we established formal agreements with their industry partners. It was really important that we sat the teacher next to the industry partner and said, okay, what can you provide over here for the industry? What can you provide industry partner over here for the teacher? And making sure that the student in her classroom can be successful in your workplace. And so by doing that, they both were able to collaborate and sit down and say, hey, I have these resources, I can do this. Industry says, hey, I can do this. And so that was really important in making sure that they felt like they could make sure that student was successful in the skill set in the workplace. And then implementing student assessment tools was really important. So if they go out there and do a job shadow, how do we know they're successful? How do we know they benefited from that job shadow? And so that's one of the things that we wanted them to understand is what are those assessment tools they need to make sure they're benefiting from every work-based learning experience they participate in. And then conducting biannual reviews of the partnership effectiveness. So in other words, how are you checking in with those partners to make sure the work-based learning experiences are effective? Because you have to find out if the partners are seeing those work-based learning experiences being effective for them as well, not just for the student, not just for the teacher. So we felt like celebrating successes was very important. So hosting events to acknowledge the industry education and partners together, acknowledging that the work-based learning experiences were successful, the students were benefiting, the partners were benefiting from it, the schools were benefiting, and then again, highlighting student success in local media as well within school communications, awarding certificates of recognition. I'm a former high school teacher, so I'm also a former work-based learning teacher. And that's one of the things we did. We had an end-of-year banquet where we provided certificates and awards for all of our work-based learning industry partners. Some of our partners were 5-year partners, 10-year partners, 20-year partners. And so it really benefited them to see how much we appreciated their partnership and success. Many of those partners helped many of our students pay for half of their tuition here to Texas Tech because the students were so successful in their companies, they wanted to keep them there while they were attending Tech. So we really appreciated those types of partnerships. Now, I worked with 60 school districts in the state of Texas, but we focused on 9 school districts in particular because these particular school districts, you see 8 up here. I'll talk about what happened to the 9th one here in just a moment. But these school districts were really progressive in that they decided we're going to implement a work-based learning experience in every family consumer science course we offer in our school district. So I was really pleased with that. So I have 3 urban school districts. Those are school districts with 1,000 students or more. I have 2, you see 2 suburban school districts. We had 3 suburban, but then one of the family consumer science teachers' husbands was in the Air Force and he got transferred to California. So we had to drop one of our suburban school districts out midway through. And then we have 3 rural school districts. And so all of these school districts allowed us to do focus groups with all of them. So we did focus groups with teachers, with industry partners, with administrators, and with students on all of these here. And so one of the things we wanted to do with all of the teachers that participate in this project is we wanted to provide a 2-day work-based learning training and show them all of the different work-based learning experiences they could provide from career awareness all the way to career training. So you would think career awareness is happening at the elementary school level, but you'd be surprised how it's not in many elementary schools. And so we wanted them to be aware, even at the freshman level in high school, you may have students coming in who don't have any clue about where they want to go, or maybe not even had an opportunity to even experience anything about careers at all. So we wanted them to know you could do some career fairs, but think about doing some things that you could do: informational interviews, industry tours, all kinds of different things at that level. On the career exploration side, again, doing some informational interviews, maybe even doing some job shadowing on that side. And again, all kinds of different things. We gave them a whole list of different activities. What was unique about this is a lot of them didn't know how to set those up. So we showed them how to set a job shadow up, how to set up a school-based enterprise, how to set up an internship, a pre-apprenticeship, an apprenticeship, or a job placement, whichever the case may have been, all the way through so that they could choose all of those different things. And then we gave them an action plan to put it in place so they could choose which course they wanted to put that work-based learning experience in. And so those particular school districts you just saw, they decided to implement a work-based learning experience in every course from introduction all the way to advanced. So we were excited about that opportunity. So some key outcomes and benefits we saw is that they successfully integrated feedback into their curriculum, aligning it with real world applications. So industry was able to say, hey, we like what you're doing here. Can we provide you some feedback and integrate some things that we want you to look at? And then we also established some long-term agreements with over 10 local industry partners, even in the rural areas, believe it or not. A lot of them don't have a lot of industry, so you'd be surprised. A lot of them created some sustainable work-based learning opportunities for students. And then we started looking at over 80% of participating students reported an increased interest in FCS careers and felt better prepared for the workforce. So that was really wonderful. And I looked at a report across the state, 70% of our students that are in college are working. Why not have them work in something they're really interested in pursuing in the future? And then on the professional development side, we provided training for over 112 FCS educators on implementing high-quality work-based learning. And we told these 112 teachers, we want you to train your colleagues from here on out. So you be train the trainers here. And then some challenges and lessons we learned. There were communication gaps. And so we wanted to, especially making sure there was clear communication between them and their industry partners. So we resolved this by implementing regular updated meetings, making sure they have an updated meetings, using a shared digital platform also for collaboration. Plus we met with them every quarter because this was a 3-year research project. So we could find out what was going on, if everything was working okay. And that gave them time too to network with the other teachers that were across the state. And so they were collaborating with each other as well. There were some differences in expectations between school districts and industry partners regarding student readiness and skills. So imagine that. Some schools were kind of hesitant to enforce attendance, enforce being on time, enforce initiative. So this industry came in and said, hey, if you want these schools to be ready for the workforce, you've got to do that. And so there were some things there that we helped them look at addressing, developing a shared set of goals. And this is where we worked with administrators on this aspect and showed benchmarks and set up benchmarks for all stakeholders involved. And then we also kept all parties motivated, engaged over the long term. And that was really challenging, particularly when immediate benefits weren't visible. Some of the other things, again, establishing clear communication channels, make regular check-ins. We were doing that constantly. We also offered some project management tools to keep track of milestones so they could see progress as they were moving along. Creating defined roles and responsibilities. We helped them create a memorandum of understanding. Probably all of you are aware of those. The Texas Education Agency has a training plan agreement, but it's not very good. So we wanted them to define their roles and responsibilities and expectations much better. So MOUs were much better to put in place for each of the partners and so forth. And then we engaged all partners in setting realistic and measurable goals throughout the whole process. And then continuous feedback and evaluation, again, making sure we had regular feedback sessions, seeing what was working, what was not working, all of those kinds of things, and looking at what do we need to adjust? What do we need? Why is it working here and not here? And those kinds of things, and having those conversations was really important. And then making sure we're celebrating small wins. That's really important as well. And then continuous professional development opportunities. We were surprised. Many industry partners said, hey, can we come in and provide professional development for your teachers? Because we have some things going on in industry that we'd like to show them and so forth. So they came in and did professional development with teachers, including some things with AI, which we thought was really interesting on that side. So from here on out, we see a need to ensure future sustainability of this project, obviously for all of these reasons here. And right now in this community, I'm working with our local Economic Development Alliance, our local Chamber of Commerce, and our regional workforce organization. We're trying to develop an intermediary workforce organization where we work with all these employers who are going to provide all of these work-based learning opportunities. We're going to provide that list for all 3 school districts in this area. So that way teachers are going to be able to choose all of these different employers and see all these work-based learning opportunities they're going to provide. And so they don't have to go out there and find them. We're going to help them have them. So that way they can provide all of these different work-based opportunities and all of our career and technical education programs, not just in family and consumer sciences education. And I had a graduate research assistant that worked with me on this. She's now graduated with her PhD last year. She's at Texas State. I wish she could have been here with me. She was an asset. I appreciated her so much. I thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
On the teachers in the districts, were they volunteering to have their classes to this, or was this the principal that kind of conditioned them? We want this.
Yes, well, obviously I had to make sure I got the superintendent's permission to participate in the project. Then we had to get the principal's permission to participate, and then we had to get the teachers to volunteer to permission. So we had to go through 3 consent areas to get all of that. And then once we got the teachers to consent, then obviously if they wanted to participate, we obviously had to make sure we got parent and student consent on that side as well. So yes, there was a lot of consent process through all that, but all of them were willing to do that, especially the parents, because they were really excited that their students are going to be involved in finding out more about the career fields that were involved in family and consumer sciences in particular. And they were shocked. We have a lot of different fields in every area in family consumers, from social work to family financial planning. Matter of fact, when we did the training, we were surprised that our middle school, we had one middle school teacher who was doing a career cafe every month, which means she brought in an industry partner every month for 30 to 45 minutes to tell students about that profession while they were eating lunch. And then the students could ask questions. Well, that's a work-based learning opportunity. And then another teacher taught financial literacy at the high school level, and she had a financial planning firm that was coming in. They had pro bono clients, low-income families and they gave a group of students, these low-income families, and students developed financial portfolios for these low-income families, which taught them tons about financial literacy. And of course, the financial advisors worked with all of them and everything and so forth. That's a work-based learning experience. And so they were amazed they were already doing this and didn't even realize that that's what they were doing.
How come it was convincing the students to participate? Was it mandatory or sort of extra critical?
It wasn't really hard for the students to convince the students at all, because once they realized they were actually going to participate with the industry partner from outside, that was really exciting for them, because they were actually going to see whether or not the teacher was teaching them the skills they needed to be successful out here. So it wasn't really that hard to convince them whatsoever on that side.
Just a pilot program or?
Well, no, we started off at the beginning with just one work-based learning experience part, but I've been in touch with them since the end of the project, and they're all implementing several now. And so they've continued the work-based learning experiences from here on out and so forth.
It's pretty much all over in Texas or?
Yes, or at least in our family consumer science programs. Now, there are other career technical programs that have work-based learning experiences also that they're providing, like in our automotive programs, construction programs, business programs. A lot of them have those types of things, but I was focusing mainly on family consumer science because I was wondering why we weren't doing more in those areas, because we have a huge need. And like, we teach mental health and counseling. We have a huge need in that area. We have a huge need also in childcare. That's another area that we teach in, and so forth. So I was wondering why we weren't doing more. And it wasn't because the FCS teachers didn't want to do more in that area, it's because they didn't have training in those areas to do more. So it's very interesting to see how some programs had more training than these teachers did for some reason. And so I was curious as to why they didn't, and they just said they were never invited for that type of training, which I think is really strange. Thank you for the questions. Any others?
One from an online. Could you speak a little bit more about how the initial community partnership was developed? Like, did you reach out? Was it already in place?
I didn't reach out to the industry partners. The teachers did themselves. I asked them to identify one industry partner, and really they all had what's called a career and technical education administrator that also helped them reach out to that industry partner. So they had that, and some of them were already familiar with some industry partners out there, but so they connected with that one by themselves. And then I worked with that industry partner further and helping that industry partner understand exactly what they were going to be doing and so forth. Yes.
Sorry, just to clarify that a little more, what was your relationship to those teachers?
My relationship to those teachers was me being a teacher educator, because we prepare student teachers for family consumer science
So
education.
all of these were your student teachers in the field?
No, but they knew me because I'd done presentations at their family consumer science teacher organization.
You
association.
reached out to teachers that were in service based on your teacher prep work here at Texas Tech?
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So thanks for showing up. That's awesome. Actually, and I want to say for me, this was already fun and worthwhile before any word, because I sat next to someone, old friend Reagan, learned what he was up to. We had sort of done things together, and now we're talking again. And it just shows to me the importance of being in a room with people. Like, who knows where your next project is, even in this room. So I think that's one lesson. Just keep going to stuff. Like, awesome. So what I'm going to do is to focus on mostly the idea of strategies for working with community partners. And I'm going to look at principles and then give examples of them, because, for example, if you read books or articles on community engagement, you'll read things like, make sure you have community-driven priorities, and you'll read, make sure you have shared decision-making. So those are the words, but then what does it look like? How does it work? And how does it sometimes not work? That's really what I kind of want to do to give pictures of how what that might look like. So the experiences that I'm going to draw from our 3 projects. Well, I oversee the Early Head Start program in East Lubbock. So we are a community partner with other organizations, and we seek out community partnerships as well. Then in the past, I worked with East Lubbock Promise Neighborhood, and that was a very fruitful experience. And I'll bring some examples from that. And more recently, I worked with different collaborators in different departments on veggie consumption in young children. So I'll bring in those experiences. And I hope that I think the big message that I have right now is to be really open-minded about what a community partner is and where they might live. So let's say that you're looking for a partner, you have some area of potential expertise, adult literacy, youth intervention, aging and loneliness, school readiness, water safety, heart disease, whatever, and you want to find a partner. You probably know the big players in town already. You know LISD, Garrison Geriatric Center, Early Childhood Intervention, Lubbock Literacy. So you have some ideas. But right away, I would say, if you haven't been to work with the folks that put on this Lunch and Learn Outreach and Engagement with Texas Tech, then you're missing out, because they have lots of ideas and advice about, this is my topic, who might I pal up with? The next thing is that it's well known, like in all the articles that you read on this topic, that you must not rush out like an evangelist, right? And you have to set up meetings first. You have to invite input. You have to listen to input. And then you find a focus together. And the worst thing that you could do is have this mindset, which I've heard 100 times. I'm from Texas Tech. I'm here with students, or my funding, or my expertise, or my research on your issues, or my needs assessment, and I know what we're going to do, or I know what to advise you. Don't start that way. That's not the way to start. And even as I say it, I hope you have a sense of, just is not a good way to form an actual partnership. And there are lots of really interesting case studies where they show why this is a bad idea. One is there are studies of university partners who had the data of health issues in a community, and they found that heart disease and diabetes was a big problem in that area. But when they talked to people in the community, not only did they not know that, but they thought their biggest issue was teen pregnancy. And so they weren't going to go for that diabetes prevention problem, right? So a lot of if the group did go for it anyway, you can already predict what a failure it might have been, because they didn't even see it as a problem. So there would have been work to do there. And here's a little trick that most organizations and agencies have mission statements and goals already written up somewhere. If you find them out before you talk, like this is one from Head Start. So if you find them out, you can align yourself much more easily with what they are already doing. And you can say, here's what I have to offer, because I know you're focused on this. So this is just a piece of information from Head Start. And it talks about where their goals are in various arenas. And so if you want to work with them, have a look at this and say, here's where maybe we could do some good things together based on what they're already doing. And don't wait to go there and ask them. You can figure this out. Impressive. It's like when you go on a job interview, you got to learn about the university first, put something on the table. Now, say you don't have that information, you have to ask. So in one case, we had funding for school readiness. Reagan's telling me he's looking at right now. And we had a research team ready to go. We wanted to partner with LISD, and we already knew what the research said about school readiness. But we didn't go in and tell them that. Instead, we set up lots of meetings in schools with the teachers of preschool children and kinder, the ones who are, getting ready to greet children. And we said, tell us your most pressing problems. Tell us what you wish children knew before they came to you. And we took lots of notes. We just listen. And you know what? It turned out that what they told us in the end, it was self-regulation, right? Being able to control yourself a little bit, and vocabulary, so language, was exactly aligned with the literature. But it was much more powerful then to go and partner with LISD. And by partner, I mean, we wanted money from them, by saying, well, here's what your teachers told us. And by the way, here's what the data says. So they were ready to go. And so what we ended up doing was setting up summer camps and, that LISD did fund. Now, the thing is, it is this kind of fundamental tenet of engaged scholarship that everyone has knowledge, right? We do, our partners do, administrators, parents, teachers, everyone we deal with brings knowledge to the table. It would be such a mistake to think we come with the knowledge and they come with, I don't know, something else, right? So we all bring knowledge, but there is one thing that we can bring that we are lucky enough to have that a lot of groups don't have funding for, and that is data collection, right? We can do that. And it's something we can offer. So in this case with the pre-K camps, what we did was we said, if you fund the program, we will collect data for you. And they said, good. If you give us data that shows it's impactful, we'll present it to the upper ups, and then that will allow us to keep funding it. So hand in hand. And to collect data, I mean, it is very helpful to have funded students, I have to admit, but even if you didn't, you could probably manage some students to help you collect the data. And there it was a very nice, trade-off. In the beginning, we did a lot of organization for the implementation, but eventually we were the data collectors, and that's something that we can offer. So speaking of data collection and partnerships, everybody well knows that when you apply for serious funding, you have to leverage what you've already done, right? You have to show that you have worked with partners and you have had successful partnerships with them. You kind of have to build up one project, then another, and another. And one way that you can do that is by getting local or even not local foundation funding, right? Funding from foundations. And that can kind of set you up to prepare for bigger federal grants, because you will have to leverage a track record. So it turns out foundations, they also want to see a history of successful collaborations. You can't just come in and say, ask from me for them. You've got to show that you have some successful history. And there's a group at Texas Tech, I don't know if everyone works with them, but institutional advancement, and you get to them through your college development people. Once they learn about you and they learn what your interests are, they will start approaching you. Here's an opportunity of to seek foundation funding, and they will even reach out to the officers and set up Zoom meetings. They are awesome. So I want to give an example of a case where we failed to do that properly. We wanted, at Early Head Start, the staff there noticed that we have a bunch of land and they wanted to develop a garden with it. And they had it was so fun, so creative. We had someone to donate windmills, because water is the problem with gardens in Lubbock, right? That's why gardens sometimes fail. There's no water and it's expensive. Anyway, we got that. We were going to have family gardening. We were going to have therapies out there. We worked with landscape architecture, nutrition, and master gardeners. But when we submitted, they said, well, talk to us about your partnership with South Plains Food Bank. And now we had a letter from them, but a letter, you get a letter from anybody for anything. And we said, well, we have a letter. And they said, yeah, come back next year. So we went to them and said, look, we really want to partner more seriously than a letter. And they said, fine, but here's the thing. When you partner with people who need bodies and help, there's a trade-off there. So they said, would you serve on our board? Would you host some community lunches? And we're going, yeah, right? Like, just choose one. You have to bring something to the table. You can't just ask for their help and then run back to your office on campus. So over the years, I stepped up whenever people asked me whatever they wanted. Speak at events, that's pretty good. Donate children's books. Okay, I wrote for funding to get children's books to donate for early literacy programs. Set up booths at resource fairs. That means you got to be there, feet on the ground, talk to people, see them. Be present at Juneteenth, read books there. Set up children's rooms at events for parents. Okay, I will. Buy a ticket for galas. Yes, I'll be there. Attend and celebrate when the community celebrates, which turns out in the communities that we were dealing with to be basketball games. I had never been to a high school basketball game since high school, but there I was shaking hands with people. Hey, how's it going? Yeah. Oh, you're the book lady, they would say. Yeah. And then we would form some relationships and doors would open. Who knew you had to be at a basketball game, right? You had to bring stuff to the table. So fully participate. So the next one I want to talk about is building trust. And that is in essence what I've been saying so far, except that I want to emphasize you have to show up, contribute, listen. When we wanted to develop early literacy programs in East Lubbock, we first met with the only people we knew, which were the local principals. Okay, but then they told us, they said, you know what, who has a lot of sway in our area? Churches. Okay. Every Sunday, I was out at the local churches and choirs and choir meetings and meetings of pastors trying to pitch our program because I wanted their, well, you know what I wanted was their blessing. And I wanted them to talk it up. And I wanted their buy-in. And I also wanted their advice. So in one case, one pastor, an influential one, refused. He said, I don't really know you. I said, fair enough. I said, how can we help? I said, well, could you get us some books? Yes, I got some books. Absolutely, and books that they would have liked. And eventually, they began to work with us. We had meetings together. We did form relationships, but I mean, it was not in 2 days. I have to tell you that. It was more like 2 semesters. So they did, and we got a lot of advice on how the best way to set up programs, where people would attend, what they would do, how to work with parents and children together. They talked and we listened. And also we hoped that they would sell our message to their congregates, and they did. They were very creative. I mean, to hear how pastors talk about the importance of reading, you can imagine where that might lead to, but I mean, it was awesome and creative. We also learned by talking to them that barber shops and hair salons were important areas of early literacy. Well, who knew that? Actually, there are some articles about it in other places about what people have done. But so we went to visit every hair salon and barber shop in East Lubbock, shook hands. I mean, they were really looking at us when we came in, but talked to them. We had a lunch for them on a Monday. You know, everything's closing on Monday, so that's when you invite barbers out. I don't know, we pled our case to them, we built our case, because it turns out that in our population, people visit those places like almost every week, and they become very familiar with the people there. And if you can talk up, hey, it's really important to read to your child. And we brought the books, of course, we set them up there. It turned out that that was an awesome way to influence and or build positive influence in the community. But I don't know that you know that by reading anything. You only know it when you go out and talk to people. And the snowball effect, right? We learned that we needed to be at Jamaica's for Cinco de Mayo's. We were there. We learned that we should partner with 100 Black men of West Texas, and we did. And we went to meetings and, you know, advanced our case there. And you might imagine that this is very time consuming. Okay, it is. Can't hide that. But there was also a fun aspect to it and a kind of real aspect. And it was the only way we could become known and trusted in the community. If we wanted to recruit participants in our programs, we had to have people speaking well of us and for us. Here's an example of a case where that sort of didn't happen. We set up funding, we set up parent education programs in the community, and we hired some teachers to lead those classes. And when we were talking it up, I was calling people to talk it up, and they said, wait, who are the teachers? I said, oh, so and so and so and so, and here are their, you know, their pedigrees. And she said, I don't know those people. She said, have they been out in the community? I said, yeah, they have. And she said, well, I don't know them. And I said, oh. She said, why didn't you hire someone, you know, who lives in East Lubbock? Good point, right? So it taught me that you know, you got to meet people where they are. So after that, we learned, and I think it's sort of what you're doing too, Reagan. We hosted big community events for, you know, a semester where we could introduce ourselves and our people to those that we hoped would participate. And we did them in unusual ways, like we worked with Habitat for Humanity. They came and read books. We worked with Education Service Center. They did beautiful kindergarten block building, like actual blocks, kindergarten blocks. Also, so we hosted events for families to come and say, hey, hello, how are you? We're doing this, you know, come on in and, you know, have a good time here. But at least they saw the faces of the people who were involved. Now, I want to mention gatekeepers or key players next, because that is also key, that you have to meet the influential people that will speak for you, and they are helpful in multiple ways. They understand the perspectives of people in the community. So when problems crop up and you can't see your way to, clear to address it, you call up your gatekeeper, your community informant, your key player, and say, look, this thing happened. I don't really know how to understand it. Talk to me about it. And you go have lunch and you talk about it. They will coach you in making your pitches. It happened many times to me. We're out on the street and they said, okay, tell me what you're going to say. And I said, so I'm Dr. Shine, they were like coaching right then and there. They will vouch for you. They will problem solve for you. And so we try to involve the key players in doing things in our programs. So school principal, Margaret Randall, Amanda Banks helped us with churches, but so we had them at our events, right? We drew them in that way. We're happy to have them. That's TJ Patterson. May he rest in peace. He was a huge advocate for us and promoted our programs in his Southwest Digest. This is a DJ. And there's Bill Stubblefield. He was our #1 advocate. He had this booming voice. I didn't know anything about him, but I heard the voice when I was going to meetings. I said, let's talk to that guy. He's a pastor and then he was a school trustee, and he gave us tons of advice all the time. We sometimes failed at it too. We wanted to cultivate relationships with leaders in East Lubbock. And in one case, we saw someone who seemed to be a great leader at a community apartment. She was gathering the kids. She told us lots of stories. We saw she was really leading the way, and we had in mind to, work with her to do what we did, but, sort of a local event organizer. And then it turned out she was really organized, but it was because she was selling drugs and she didn't even go to that apartment complex. So we said, okay, that wouldn't have been ideal, but she had great skills. Just we used the community leaders to put their faces on billboards to promote early literacy. And here's what I want to mention this bit here, that ideally this can segue into your partners being your research partners. And we did get this really super idea from one of the parents in our veggie consumption project. They talked about the importance of peer modeling. And so that idea from a parent during a session that we had with them, that idea turned into the germ of the idea for our next project, which is on exemplification and involves people from various other colleges and departments at Texas Tech. So when you are present and talk and meet and spend time and, boots on the ground kind of thing, you not only are you able to set up your partnerships, but you benefit immeasurably. And they did ask us to mention something about celebrations. So in every project that I've been with, we do have huge celebrations at the end. I don't know if you can see here, this was the veggie one. The children, we had a huge harvest festival for children and parents. They're playing with pumpkins, and here they're washing vegetables in the other picture. And again, we worked with community partners to make it happen. We couldn't do that, but we had farmers and AgriLife Extension and supermarkets and nutrition educators, and they came out and did their thing and brought their stuff. We never could have done it on our own, which leads me then to kind of the final point, which is that I think that we operated not with one partner, but in this whole web of community partnerships, some that spread the word, some that brought their stuff, some that helped us get funding, some that gave us advice, but we were kind of ensconced. And I think if you did a visual, it would literally be like a web. So it can't just be you and the one partner you kind of point to in the way that we did it. We work with the community in broader terms. It was indeed a kind of web of relationships. That's it.
Have you tried to approach the community through the BACA or MSBE that are organized in campus?
So we have worked with campus organizations a fair amount. Some helped us when we planned these big community events. They stepped up and helped us, work on it. Yeah, like we would reach out to many organizations on campus and those who reached back to us, we ended up working with. Yeah, for sure. Students bring wonderful energy, to every project and great ideas, and they're better at certain things than ever will be, certainly, for sure.
Because we have done a lot of stuff, it's Lubbock,
Yeah.
through NSB in College of Engineering.
Yeah. And since now Reagan is working on this, I'm gonna say, there's a connection right there. School readiness, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, come and give your information in a second when we're done. But y'all keep adding.
Just a quick question on a complex program like this. Could you just give an example of how do you measure success in some of these events, other than, of course, you won't say counting heads, right? How many people show up? But, other
So
components.
so I don't know, maybe I should have said that, but in every program that you ever get any funding for, you do have to have a fairly significant measurement section, and you do have to collect data. And so we did use, and I will tell you, it's a big challenge to collect data when you're in the community. So we collected a lot of data on children's, for example, in the school readiness we used many school readiness assessments. We looked at language assessment, receptive and expressive, for example. And so, yeah, we always collect data. The thing is, it's tough. And, we would show, our students would watch the videos, the YouTubes, where we show this like little table and a child sitting here and the examiner there. And that looked nothing like the way we collected data. Ours were in public spaces, in the library, in apartment complex, community rooms, and the kids were under the table. And there was a mother over there trying to coach them, and someone else trying to say, here, do you want some pizza? And, so we did collect a lot of data. But I mean, you have to, basically, yeah, you have to, for sure. And in the veggie project, we collected, assessments of reading your skin for, see if you're eating yellow and green vegetables. We collected self-report data there, basically. But now when we do it, we're going to do food plate data, where you take a picture, see what they're really eating. Yeah. Thank you.
Up next, Dr. Jonathan Singer.
Thanks so much. My name is Jonathan Singer. I'm a clinical psychologist, so a lot of my work is around clinical interventions, mostly for people in the rural areas. So I'll focus a lot of my talk on the rural areas and how I came here 4 years ago, I kind of started collaborating with the community leaders as well as physicians. So the first thing I always mention is, like, you can't do this alone. So my lab's called the Grow Lab, and these are my close-knit collaborators. These are my grad students and coordinators. So that's the first thing I would say. You cannot do it alone. It is very time consuming and takes, I probably average, I would say 5 hours myself a week in the rural areas. And then my team also is in the rural areas as well. So that's the first thing, is make sure you have a really good team. So I can start kind of from the back forward. So I have, I'll talk about 3 or 4 studies today, and kind of give you a breakdown of how these came about. The first one is Project Frontier, which actually is a study that was going on well before I came here that I helped take over. And we work in 4 rural counties in West Texas. And one of the things that is really difficult in these counties is that these individuals in these counties are low SES, high Hispanic, so it's hard to get buy-in. So I'll talk about how we've got buy-in. They don't necessarily trust researchers or clinicians. So that was tough. And then Texas Cares is a telehealth study that actually started because of some of our focus groups and other things and gaps that we learned about. And then we actually started 3 weeks ago, our memory clinic, which is something that in my first week here, I heard was a huge gap in the community. So 3.5 years or 4 years later, we opened this memory clinic. So I'm going to talk about how we got to this. But you can see from this map, we work all over West Texas. We actually all work all the way down to El Paso. So we have a collaborator there because there's a ton of rural area between us and El Paso where there is no mental health. there's really no healthcare at all. They're healthcare deserts. And then we work all the way into New Mexico and Oklahoma City because New Mexico is only about an hour from us, so we do have people there, but we even have people from Albuquerque come to us. So why it matters, so the big thing for me is stakeholder driven, so what is it that stakeholders in these communities care about and what do they need, right? We can go in and say, we think you need this, and that's most likely wrong, or at least what they don't need at that time, let's say. So getting their buy-in is so important, and it's important to engage the community about research and what you're doing. And then the other thing that I always say is, what are you bringing to the table, which was mentioned before a little bit. What are you gonna bring to us? Like, are you just asking for us or are you actually gonna bring something? And part of that too is that you're not just coming in one time and you're not just saying, here, I need this, or I need this letter of support, or I need something from you, that you're coming in for many, many years. And that's kind of how it starts, is it starts slowly, but you come in yearly, and we'll talk about different events or things we do. Even when we don't even have research going on in a county, we'll still do stuff and engage in that county to keep them close and understand what it is they need. So we have these are different strategies that we use in the Grow Lab. And I'm gonna talk about each of these. So hosting events, participating in community events, meeting with community leaders, taking providers out to lunch. Everybody loves food. I know I do, so it always works. Maybe it got you here today, the food, that's great. And then engaging school systems. So I mostly work with older adults and aging adults around dementia, around loss, around cancer, having cancer and dealing with that. But we still engage the school system. So I'll explain that's kind of outside of what I do, but important, and I'll explain why. So we host a lot of events, and these events really have no research built into them. So what these are fun, interactive ways to be a part of the community, show your face, really engage. So we have, these were pictures taken from one earlier this semester in Lamesa, and it is a bingo night. So we do bingo nights. It's pretty low cost. Honestly, we have all the bingo stuff, and then we actually did get a sponsorship to give us food. And so to provide food, we just asked in their community somebody to support. So we found somebody from Lubbock who was able to support half, and then they paid the other half, and it helped the community in that way. And these are individuals that came, and we really did no research. There was no research here. The only thing we did is provide some psychoeducation around why mental health is important. And so you can see there's kids, there's older adults, there's everybody. And so we've held a couple, and we were actually there last week, and everyone was asking us when our next event was. So, showing our face in these communities is really important. And it doesn't all have to be around your research or what you need. It could just be something that's fun for the community. So we also participate in community events. So one of the things is we have events and we want support from the community, but the community wants supports for their events too. So like 2 weeks ago was the Alzheimer's Walk. So that was something we did here. But we also went down all the way to San Angelo and joined them in their walk. We also in Palmer County, so I couldn't think of the county. They have this cheeseburger festival. If you haven't been, it's wonderful. There's like 10,000 people that come from all over the US. So we got it, that's the bottom one right there. So we got a table there, and this is part of our support staff out there. And we just engaged the community of what we're doing, introduced ourselves, and that's what we did. So being vendors at their stuff too. So we do probably at least 1 to 2 events a month in different counties all over Texas where we go out and participate. And it's really interesting to talk to people. And then you'll also learn a lot about what are the gaps out there in services or things that they want to learn more about. Gaining trust from community leaders. So this is something that you're gonna need when you write NIH grants or any type of grant or foundation grants. You're gonna need leaders in the community to support you, to write you letters of support. But more than that, and more importantly than that, you have to gain their trust. These are people that introduce you to the community. So we spend a lot of time taking people out to lunch. We have luncheons, usually once a semester, where we invite everybody from that county in, and we talk about what are the needs. We just sit down at a table and talk to people. And usually it's anywhere from 30 to 40 people come, anywhere from judges to teachers, to understand that. So we really want to gain their trust. We want to be visible in these community, that we're not just using them. I think that's the big thing that people are afraid of. Taking providers to lunch, like I said, sometimes those big groups are great, but sometimes just taking them one-on-one and getting to know what it is. So one of the things we've done, and when I first got here well, it was about a year after I got here, I took a primary care physician out and let me set out to lunch. And she said, Jonathan, you work with older adults. It's so great. You have this study that you built and we're working together. But I spend an hour and a half with each patient on their mental health, and I'm a primary care physician. I shouldn't be doing that. I need to focus on their physical health. So together we talked about what are the barriers to mental health care. And so what I decided is I designed a whole study where we could do research so I could get something gained from it. But we built a study, a randomized controlled study, where it was two evidence-based arms against each other, where we actually developed telehealth services for mental health services for this provider that we're doing now. So we have over 50 people that have been in the study in the last 2 years. So she does not have to necessarily take on that burden or onus is on her. So we took that away from her, understood what she needed, and now she's more likely to participate in everything else. So we've actually collaborated on a couple of studies together. And I'll explain that when I get to some of the barriers. I talked about this engaging schools. One thing is for caregivers. So for us, I work mostly with individuals with dementia. A lot of these people who are caring for, bless you, their loved one with dementia, they're also a mom, dad, whatever. So we actually do a lot of school events. And then we also try to educate kids on what dementia is. So we actually do a lot of things around dementia care and understanding, what it's like. So we actually have a kind of dementia live-ish thing that we do. And so we did STEM night last year. And so we really enjoyed that. And it can lead to other things. We had a parent who signed up for a study. We had a couple parents actually sign up for one of our studies that we didn't even expect. We just wanted to teach them. But these are things that even going out of your comfort zone, if you say, hey, I don't work with older adults, go to a senior center event, it still could be fruitful and it's impactful. So one of the things that I try to work on and I try to talk to my students when they're designing studies, how do we reduce barriers? Okay. So the first thing is use all the stuff that I just said and understand the barrier and then figure out ways that we can fix it. So one of the things is we wanted to do this telehealth study in the rural area for family members of individuals with dementia. And before we started to talk to community leaders. But one of the things we realized that we didn't really understand, because we thought most people had the internet or most people had a computer, we were very naive. Most people, or not most people, a lot of people in these rural, especially older adults, don't have technology, might not have the internet, might not have Wi-Fi. So we might have done this study and not been able to actually do the study, not because people didn't want to, because of this barrier. So what we did was we partnered with physicians and hospitals in these areas, places that people trust, libraries as well. And we actually have a room in most of these places where we have a computer set up and it's secure. So we've reduced a barrier so they can do it at home if they want, if they don't have access to a car or other things, which is a problem. So they can do it at home, or they can come in and do it in a hospital or in a primary care physician's office or library. So we've been able to implement that and to reduce the barrier. The other barrier, and this one's a little bit harder barrier, is the financial piece of it, right? So people might not have the transportation, might not have money for gas, things like that. So we've tried to really put money into participation costs. So we pay participants for participating. So in grants, we make sure we write even more money for them. And that's something that I've learned over the years just to get them there. So reducing those barriers. The other thing is we do focus groups, not for research purposes necessarily. So we're not analyzing data as far as writing it up, but we do focus groups at least once a semester in every county that we work in. And we do this because things change, right? The world is constantly changing, whether it's COVID, whether it's, systems down and other things. We want to understand what are the problems and how we can help. And usually, even when there are problems we can't solve, we try to connect them with people So for example, we had one 2 weeks ago where we had a focus group and somebody said, there's a program called ARPA here, which is wonderful through HSC. And they said, I can't get hold of our ARPA representative who's helping us. So we just picked up the phone and tried to help them and tried to reduce that barrier. We found the person, connected them, and it did nothing for us but to help them in a way that we gain trust from the community. So having these focus groups are wonderful, and it also, I think, increases our access to this population. And sometimes it's very few people show up, and that's okay too, even if it's 2 people. The other thing is that we partner a lot with community members. So these are 2 community members that work for us, that work part-time in the community. They live in the community. They are, major advocates for our studies. They hold, this is at a health fair that we had. So they are there within the community. So if you can partner with people, and sometimes you might say, well, then we have to pay them. Well, some people even volunteer. We have volunteers in these rural areas that might be older adults themselves or younger and have some time, and 5 hours a week. Can you give 10 hours? What can you give? And they actually partner with us. And so we have actually partners in these communities, which really helps. For us specifically, we actually visit our care facilities. So for us, we hold support groups, we hold other types of things in these facilities. I think it's 70 brought up talking to ministers, and when I got here, I heard the same thing is like, you got to get in with the churches. So one of the things that we do is one of the ministers asked me 3 years ago, would you hold a support group? And so I've been holding a support group once a month for the last 3.5 years here, and I get no research out of it, but it was this give take, right? What can you do for me? And we'll help you and support you. And it also is gaining the trust, right? He knows me now. When he writes his letter for a letter of support, he can say, Jonathan Singer has been doing this, this, and this. I see him once a month. I know him, and we go to lunch too. So, those are things that you just have to put in the work, I think is the biggest thing I tell my students. You have to put in that work. And this is the kind of the last slide I had. It's just really gaining insight from the community of what they need. So respite care was a big thing when we came here. So caregivers were saying, how can I do your intervention? We don't even have respite. So we designed a whole study called Creative Minds. One of my students, Sydney, who helped with this presentation actually, designed a whole study where we provide free respite for 3 hours a week, which is a recreational intervention for the person with dementia. And so we heard them when we've done these focus groups, and we've designed respite care for them. Also helping us because we get research out of it. She gets her thesis and hopefully dissertation. And then we are able to help them as well. We have virtual support groups because they're like, great, you have support groups in Lubbock. I can't make it to Lubbock. I can't drive 2 hours. So we've done that. Telehealth options, and then difficult to see providers. This was a big thing when I started here takes 12 months, takes even longer in rural areas to see a provider. So we've opened this memory clinic, which has been a goal of mine from the beginning, but something we're really interested in. So thank you, and I'll take questions now.
I have a question. This might be off the wall a little bit, but you and the other speakers have talked about taking people to lunch and doing things with them. Where do you get the funding for that? Because I know my budget personal can't afford to do that regularly to build all those partnerships. And I have several partners I'm working with. Where do you get the funding?
It's a really good question. I think small foundation grants are where a lot of my funding, I write in probably 2 to 3 times the amount for recruitment than I think is needed because of this exactly. So I think that helps. I think when I first got here, I did probably pay a few times out of pocket, which was unfortunate, but something that I did. But I think those small grants, there's some internal grants, that can help with things like that. I'm lucky as just a clinician here. We have a clinic here, so I'll supervise students, and so we get some funds funds back for that. So I use things like that all for that stuff. But I know it's hard to do it. So that's why if you can't do things like lunches, like doing bingo nights, very low cost. Happy to lend anybody bingo stuff if you need, just let me know. I have all the bingo stuff. And I think that's low cost. You can go to a provider. We even got like, our second time we did it, because we were told by, a 7-year-old girl came up and said, your prizes aren't so good. So we got better prizes next year. So, we went out, we just talked to the community and said, hey, it'd look good for you guys too to be supporting this. And we got a lot of community support, from them to fund the food, fund our prizes, things like that. So if you can't afford the lunches, still doing things like that are really helpful. But I do agree, it's a huge barrier. Where do you get that money for, to do that? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It is 1 o'clock, so I'm not rushing you out or anything, but thank you so much for joining us. If, but like after you leave, you think of questions you should have asked, or like if something comes to you, please, you all should have my email because you've registered and all of that. Please feel free to send those to me and I can get them to our presenters and everything. And I will be sending out today's session recording as well.
And I want to just take a quick second to introduce myself. I'm a faculty fellow in outreach and engagement. My job specifically is to help with measurement and evaluation. So as you guys are looking at and thinking about these sorts of projects, this is part of my initiative in the Office of Outreach and Engagement, is to help you guys get set up with consultations, figure out measurements, trying to set up a survey builder so that we can have easy ways for you to get this data back to kind of create a reciprocal relationship. So if you need anything, my email, I'm part of the O&E team. Feel free to reach out to me as well. So, thank you.
I'll put that in the email that I sent
Thank
out.
you. That's it.
Thank you all so much.
Have a great one.
I know, absolutely.